there are far more laments than any other type of psalm, and Brueggemann calls these songs of disorientation. And there are a couple of things that can happen here. We can lament at, it's plainly the occasion for a lament, whether when it was written or when we encounter it or when we pray it. A good time to pray these is when we're experiencing seasons of disorientation, when things are not well in the world, where there is no shalom or peace, when things are going badly. Somebody dies, somebody is sick, my bank account's empty, I lost my job, somebody cut me off on the road, and I'm angry. Somebody's abusing us. Somebody is insulting us. Anytime where we're just, we are circumstantial creatures, and we are dominated by a law, C.S. Lewis said, of undulation. At times we're on the mountaintop and it's amazing, and our life is great, and we're rightly oriented. At other times we are in the toilet and just hanging on to the rim, hoping we don't go down the hole. And so the laments come in those times. So Psalm 57 is a nice little example here. That I am in the midst of lions. I am forced to dwell among man-eating beasts, whose teeth are spears and arrows, whose tongues are sharp swords. And you're just like, oh, I totally get that. I know exactly what it is to feel like I am under assault, under attack, right? The good psalm to break out in that day. Now, it might interest you to know that at times, and this is an example of one of them, is that whatever trouble there is comes from an enemy. An enemy could be a government that you don't like or that's oppressive. It could be a friend who has betrayed you. An enemy could be that jerk who is in the next cubicle at work. It could be virtually any enemy that might likely appear on your horizon.
Or an illness.
Yeah, or an illness. And boy, don't you know, I've as a pastor, I've walked with many, many, many people who have both survived cancer and who have not survived cancer. And one of the things that I have seen on numerous occasions are people that really think of cancer as an enemy, and they want to spit in its eye, and they want to fight it to death, and they hate cancer. And I share in that hatred, and I think of cancer as an enemy, and I pray a psalm like Psalm 57 there. That's a good psalm for those kinds of days, right? Now, at times, it may not be an external enemy. Sometimes the laments can be uttered when the psalmist is an enemy to himself or an enemy to herself. Listen to this one, Psalm 22. This one is the Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, the words of Jesus from the cross. But listen to the expression of alienation that it says, that I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. This is verses 14 and 15. My heart has turned to wax. It has melted within me. My mouth is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth. And you lay me in the dust of death. Psalm 13 expresses something similar. You hear somebody who is perplexed, and that perplexity is experienced as suffering. How long must I wrestle with my thoughts, and day after day have sorrow in my heart, is verse 2 of Psalm 13. Now, the other place that a psalm can locate an enemy And this is the toughest one of all. Sometimes it's an external enemy, whether a person or an illness or a condition. Sometimes it's internal, that I'm an enemy somewhat to myself. I've succumbed to self-destruction, or I'm lost in self-accusation or just perplexity. But every once in a while, the Psalms and in a couple other places in the Bible, it's God that's an enemy. And if you that's not Sunday school religion by any stretch. In Sunday school we're taught that God's always our friend, and never an enemy, and never an adversary, and always protects us. But if you've gotten kicked in the teeth a few times in life, or have had some really terrible things happen to you, it's not unusual. And I know that pastors are not supposed to have thoughts like this, but boy, there have been times when I've shaken my hand at the sky and said, if this is what following you means, then screw it. I don't like this, and I don't like you. And if I were running the universe, I would be running things very differently than you're running things right now. And the idea that you can actually experience God as an adversary, as an enemy, it's not something that we're usually very easy to admit to ourselves. But in those moments where those thoughts come to mind, you've got a companion in the Psalms. I love the language, and it's not a psalm, but it expresses itself much in the same way. There's a moment where Jeremiah was called to be like a prophet, and it was like the worst job ever. It is basically holding Israel's hand, knowing that they're going into exile. And Jeremiah lived in a context where everybody who went by the title prophet was either prophesying that God's going to bail us out, he's not going to let the Babylonians come in and destroy us, keep hope, and they had all the happy songs of praise on their lips, that we're rightly oriented to the world and God's bailing us out, don't worry. There were other prophets that said, what we really need to do is get good and cranky and beat up on those Babylonians when they come for us, and God will certainly give us victory in battle. And the message that God gave to Jeremiah was the right message, but what a terrible message, and it's the worst job ever. You're going to be destroyed. You're going to get wiped out. You're going into exile. Nothing you do is going to change that. Blah. And I mean, when everybody's trying to rally the troops around you, that's a terrible message.
Is there a psalm that directly addresses God as the enemy?
Oh yeah. There's Jeremiah looks up and says, God, you liar, you lied to me and I was deceived.
Which psalm is that?
That's the book of Jeremiah itself.
The book of Jeremiah.
Yeah. But here's another one. This is Psalm 102. For I eat ashes as my food. This is Psalm 102, verses 9 and 10. And I mingle my drink with tears because of your wrath, for you have taken me up and thrown me aside. And the idea that God's supposed to be nice to us, right? It seems that the Israelites were singing these kinds of songs in the book of Isaiah. There's Isaiah chapter 40 is one of my all-time favorite passages. And the prophet Isaiah addresses the Israelites who are in exile. And he said, why do you assert, O Israel, and proclaim, O Jacob, that your way is hidden from the Lord? And that God does, and basically they're singing psalms like God does not know and God does not care about us. If he knows he doesn't care, and if he and because he doesn't care, we're pretty sure that he doesn't even know. And so they're like, saying, okay, well, if you're done with us, then phooey, we're kind of done with you. And it's in the context of the singing of those songs that Isaiah then comes around and says, God's indeed aware of you, and God indeed has sent you into exile as punishment, but your hope's in the future here. And if you wait on the Lord, you'll renew your strength, and you'll mount up as wings as eagles. You'll run and not get weary, and walk and not faint. So that's when things are starting to look bright. But the Israelites were absolutely fine with being particularly candid with God. And in the moments where it feels like God's abusing, and where God is trashing you, and where God is putting stumbling blocks in your way, and you feel like you're fumbling and falling all over the place. One of my very favorite pictures is the story in Genesis where Jacob, who gets to be renamed Israel later, is out there, and he's facing down the real possibility that he's going to meet his adversary brother Esau. And he's looking at this encounter that's coming up on the horizon, and he realizes that if he goes and meets Esau, he's kind of taking his life in hand. So what he starts doing as kind of a chicken is he sends all of his livestock and all of his servants across the river. And then he sends his wife and his children across the river, and he stays behind. And the idea is that, either Esau is going to kill them, and then I'll know that he's definitely going to try and kill me, or if Esau sees that he'll have mercy on them, and he'll realize that there might be some good reason to spare my life. And while he's sitting on the other side of the Jabbok at night, it says that Jacob is ambushed by a stranger, and they go into this mortal combat. And the text is very ambiguous. It says that it's a man and an enemy, and then what ends up happening is Jacob, I guess, is a good enough wrestler that he starts to be able to vindicate himself and starts to get the upper hand. And then it says that there's an angel, and the angel touches his hip socket and basically pulls his leg out of socket. And which means that you're not able to wrestle anymore because you can't use your leg to prevent yourself from being rolled over by somebody. And so all Jacob can kind of do is hang on to the guy. And it says, an angel, a malak, a messenger. And then it becomes clear that Jacob knows something's going on here, and so he won't let go. And he says, I won't let go unless you bless me. And this man, who's a mysterious stranger and who then may be an angel, finally we realize that it is no angel, no stranger, no man. It's Yahweh himself. And the great lesson of the text is that God is at times, we experience him as an adversary. He ambushes us. He wrestles us to the ground, and sometimes we can be wounded deeply. But the other thing is that the text kind of encourages us to engage in that struggle, to wrestle with God, to fight with God, and that at times God draws up out of us faith and a kind of resolve. And the one that we think is an adversary ends up being our friend all along. And that's easy to say when you're not fighting with God. But if you've ever spent any time, wrestling with God in the middle of the night, I totally get that story. Because I feel like God ambushes me every once in a while. Or, you start thinking that circumstances are going to work out the same way. There was one time when Tracy and I were in a place where we had to move because her job had been downsized, and we were going to have to relocate, and we had a couple of opportunities kind of out there on the horizon, and we pursued them in good faith, and the door opens, and then suddenly it closes. And for a while it felt like God was sort of faking us out. You know, the